Hello my friends, I'm Harry and my subscribers know who I am. You are on the SCIFI film channel. Today is a review of the comedy series Mr. and Mrs. Smith, created and produced by Donald Glover and Francesca Sloan. On February 2nd, the spy series Mr. and Mr. Smith was released on the Prime Video platform. According to co-creator and leading actor Donald Glover, this show is not a remake, but a reimagining of the action comedy film of the same name starring Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. In the review below, we tell you what exactly Glover and the team of authors rethought, how this affected the result, and how justified the existence of the project as a whole looks. Positive aspects of the series. The creators take practically nothing from the successful predecessor and offer their own story, and in every sense, completely different characters, the presence of a witty comedic component, and well-written dialogues, good interaction between the main characters. Spy action is successfully integrated into a story about marriage relationships, a large number of star guest appearances, witty movie references, negative aspects of the series. Sometimes dialogues last too long, the action component is relegated to the background. Not everyone will like the restrained tone and leisurely narrative in the context of comparison with a film, even a completely unacceptable one. In the eyes of the viewer, the series will certainly seem like a complete failure. He's a dark-skinned, bearded man with $300 in his pocket who loves red jackets and calls his mother 5 times a day. She is a rarely smiling Asian woman who avoids people and, instead of communicating with them, prefers to spend her time with her cat Max. The two are interviewed by a top-secret spy organization and become its new agents. They are given luxury accommodations and commit to a sham marriage where they have to pretend to be Mr. and Mrs. John and Jane Smith. Every week, the newlywed couple receives a new task via text chat from a mysterious handler and plunges into a series of dangerous Ethan Hunt-style adventures. But very soon, inspired by their first successes in the field of espionage, Mr. and Mrs. Smith break their own agreement and demonstrate real romantic feelings for each other. Of course, this factor will make noticeable adjustments in the life of the quirky spouses. One of the authors and performer of the title role, Donald Glover, emphasized that his creation is precisely a rethinking of the 2005 hit of the same name, and not its remake. This is noticeable even from the synopsis, and is felt from the opening frames. If you still look at this project through the prism of comparison with the film, in particular as a modern interpretation of a fairly successful comedy action film of the mid-2000s with 2 superstars in the frame, then it will probably be 1 out of 10. But that's the rub, that the new Mr. and Mrs. Smith is so different in style, mood, performance, content, and the like that any comparison would not make any sense. The existence of the series is quite justified, even despite the dubiousness of the whole plan and the initial skepticism on the part of some viewers. The project turned out to be significantly better than one might have expected, and quite funny, despite its seriousness. The local narration mainly focuses on dialogues, which are written really well, although sometimes they could have been shortened. The spy action passions are more modest than those of Brangelina and fade into the background. It makes sense to call them a background for the development of the relationships of the main characters, because dangerous adventures only complement the overall picture and serve as tests for the Smiths, testing their ability to work as a team. Each episode is a new mission with instructions in the laptop and a new location, just like in Hitman. But the main feature is that each of them is wittily and metaphorically compared with a certain period of married life. The titles of the episodes clearly hint at this. For example, in First Date, the odd couple will be in a cafe and will be walking in the park. First Vacation will involve a trip to a ski resort. In Do You Want Kids, the Smiths will almost have to babysit the capricious Ron Perlman, who is still a child. In the initial stages of production, the role of Mrs. Smith was assigned to Phoebe Waller-Bridge, co-author of No Time to Die and performer of the role of Helena in the blockbuster Indiana Jones and the Relic of Fate. But her differences in views with Glover began off-screen, before filming began, so Maya Erskine took her place. Together with Glover, they made an energetic duo that interacted well on a comedic level. Yes, Glover is not Brad Pitt at all, and Erskine is certainly not Angelina Jolie. However, there is no need to be them here, because these are fundamentally different characters who exist on a completely different plane. If we compare the characters with some couple from a Hollywood blockbuster, then the Smiths have more in common with Jack and Victoria from Joseph Kosinski's Oblivion. There, too, the alliance was imposed by the leadership, with whom the lady then came into contact, and the man had someone on his side. And this is not to mention the presence of so-called colleagues. Ultimately, this series is about how we are all, to a certain extent, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, with their own ups and downs, victories and defeats, difficulties, joys, quarrels, and an alternating desire to either kiss or smother each other with a pillow in their sleep. Mr. and Mrs. Smith turned out to be far from outstanding, but quite a normal series worth attention, which can be perceived solely from the position of complete abstraction from Doug Liman's feature film. Otherwise, there is every chance of sincerely hating him. but taking the path of least resistance and succumbing to the deliberate bias regarding the ambitious provocation from the local authors is infinitely boring. Conclusion. The 2024 Mr. and Mrs. Smith doesn't look like Doug Liman's Mr. and Mrs. Smith. The series turned out better than expected, but it is unlikely to be remembered with the same pleasant nostalgia in 20 years as the viewer remembers the film today. On this optimistic note, I want to end my story about an interesting spy series. Subscribe and comment. May the force be with you. Bye-bye.